You left the conversation an hour ago, but you're still carrying it. Their frustration is sitting in your chest. Their anxiety has become your anxiety. You walked into that room feeling fine, and you walked out feeling like something had been taken from you. And the strangest part is, nothing happened to you. Nobody insulted you. Nobody attacked you. They just talked. They just existed near you. And somehow, you absorbed whatever they were feeling as if it belonged to you. You've been doing this your entire life, walking into rooms and leaving heavier than when you arrived, listening to someone vent and feeling wrecked for the rest of the day, ending phone calls with a weight in your body that wasn't there before the call started. And you've probably been told this is a gift, that you're empathetic, sensitive, deeply attuned. But nobody talks about the cost. Nobody tells you that carrying everyone else's emotional weight will eventually leave you with nothing left for yourself. Carl Jung understood something about this that most people miss. He believed that the emotions you absorb from others aren't random. They follow a pattern, and that pattern has everything to do with parts of yourself you haven't fully claimed. Today we're going to talk about why certain people drain you, what's actually happening when you absorb someone's emotions, and how to be present with people without losing yourself in the process. The first thing to understand is that not everyone drains you equally. There are people you can spend hours with and feel energized afterward, and there are people who exhaust you in 15 minutes. That difference isn't random, it's a signal. Jung introduced the concept of projection, the idea that we unconsciously transfer our own unresolved emotions onto other people. But projection works both ways. Other people project onto you too. When someone is anxious and they haven't learned to sit with their own anxiety, that energy doesn't just stay inside them, it radiates. It fills the space between you. And if you don't have a clear sense of where you end and they begin, you absorb it. You take it on as if it's yours. This is what Jung would call a boundary of the psyche, the invisible line between your emotional world and someone else's. And for most people who experience chronic emotional draining, that line was never properly built. It's not that you're too sensitive, it's that somewhere along the way, you learned that other people's emotions were your responsibility. Maybe you grew up in a home where someone's mood dictated the entire atmosphere, where you had to read the room constantly to stay safe, where your role was to absorb, to regulate, to carry whatever the adults in your life couldn't hold. That was an intelligent adaptation. Your nervous system learned to track other people's emotional states because it needed to. It was survival. But what kept you safe as a child is now draining you as an adult because you're still absorbing, still tracking, still carrying emotions that were never yours to hold. When you walk into a room and immediately feel the tension, that's not magic. It's your mirror neuron system. Neuroscientist Vittorio Galeazzi discovered that the brain contains neurons that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. These same neurons activate with emotions. When you see someone in distress, your brain partially recreates that distress inside your own body. You literally feel what they feel, not as a metaphor, but as a neurological event. For most people, this system has a natural filter. They register someone else's emotion, process it briefly, and let it pass. But if your nervous system was trained in childhood to treat other people's emotions as threats that need managing, that filter never fully developed. The emotion comes in, and it stays. It lodges in your body. It becomes yours. Jung described something similar through his concept of participation mystique, the unconscious merging of your identity with another person's. When your psychological boundaries are porous, you don't just empathize with someone, you merge with them. Their sadness becomes your sadness. Their chaos becomes your chaos. And you can't separate what you feel from what they feel, because at a psychological level, there's no clear line between you. This is why emotional draining isn't just about energy, it's about identity. Every time you absorb someone else's emotional state, you lose a piece of your own. You walk out of conversations not just tired, but confused, unsure what you feel, disconnected from your own emotional reality because their reality overwrote yours. Here's where Jung's work gets uncomfortable. He believed that the people who drain you the most aren't draining you at random. They're activating something specific inside you, something unresolved, something you haven't looked at. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of yourself that you've rejected, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. And he observed that we are most reactive to people who carry the qualities we've disowned in ourselves. If you were taught that anger is dangerous, the angry person in the room will drain you faster than anyone else, not because anger is inherently draining, but because their anger is activating your suppressed anger. And the energy it takes to keep that suppression in place is enormous. If you were taught that neediness is shameful, the needy friend who calls you constantly will exhaust you, not just because they're demanding, but because their neediness mirrors a need inside you that you've never allowed yourself to have. This is the part most people don't want to hear. The drain isn't only coming from them. Part of it is coming from the war happening inside you. The conflict between what someone else is expressing and what you've forbidden yourself to express. This is why the same person can completely drain you while someone else in the room feels nothing. It's not about how much emotional energy that person is putting out. It's about what their energy is hitting when it reaches you. Two people can sit across from the same anxious friend. One walks away fine, the other walks away demolished. The difference isn't sensitivity. It's what's unfinished inside each of them. Jung would say that every person who chronically drains you is pointing you toward a part of yourself that still needs your attention, not their emotion, yours, the one their emotion is touching. So what changes this? How do you stay open to other people without being destroyed by their emotional weather? It starts with learning to recognize the moment it's happening. There's a specific instant, and it happens fast, where someone else's emotion crosses the line from something you're witnessing into something you're carrying. You feel the shift in your body, a tightening in your chest, a heaviness in your stomach, a sudden fog that wasn't there a minute ago. That's the moment. And the more you practice catching it, the more space you create between their emotion and your response to it. What you're building is what Jung called individuation in practice, the ability to remain yourself in the presence of another person's unconscious material, not to shut down, not to go cold, but to stay in the room without merging, to witness without absorbing, to feel compassion without taking ownership of someone else's pain. This means learning something your nervous system never learned as a child, that you can be present with someone's suffering without being responsible for fixing it, that their emotion is allowed to exist in the room without you having to metabolize it, that you can care deeply about someone and still let their feelings belong to them. It also means turning toward the shadow material that specific people keep activating. When someone drains you repeatedly, instead of building a wall against them, you ask, what are they touching in me? What suppressed emotion is rising up when I'm around them? That question doesn't excuse their behavior, but it gives you something far more valuable than a boundary. It gives you self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is the only protection that doesn't require you to shut down your heart. And slowly, you start to notice something. The people who used to flatten you don't hit the same way anymore, not because they've changed, because what they were activating inside you has been met. The suppressed anger has been acknowledged. The buried grief has been felt. The forbidden need has been allowed. And when there's nothing left to trigger, their emotional weather just becomes their emotional weather. It passes through the room without lodging inside you. The deepest shift happens when you start reclaiming the parts of yourself you gave away, the needs you suppressed, the emotions you learned to hide, the anger, the grief, the vulnerability you weren't allowed to have. Because when those parts are integrated, when they belong to you consciously, other people's expression of them stops feeling like a threat. It just becomes their experience, not yours. And the drain stops, not because you've built a wall, but because there's finally a clear line between who you are and who they are. Here's what I want you to take from this. The emotional draining you've experienced your entire life was never a sign that something is wrong with you. It was a sign that your nervous system learned very early to treat other people's inner world as your responsibility. That learning kept you safe once, It kept you connected to people you needed. It was intelligent. It was adaptive. But you're not that child in that house anymore. And the skill that once protected you is now costing you your own emotional life. Jung spent his career arguing that the path to wholeness isn't about building higher walls. It's about knowing yourself so deeply that other people's unconscious material can't hijack yours. It's about reclaiming every part of yourself you gave away, every emotion you suppressed, every need you buried, every piece of your identity you sacrificed to keep someone else stable. When those pieces come home, when you finally own everything you are, something remarkable happens. You can sit with someone in their darkest moment and remain whole. You can witness pain without drowning in it. You can love people fully without losing yourself in them. That's not coldness, that's completeness. And it's the only kind of strength that lets you stay open to the world without being consumed by it.